Hey guys, so as Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald approaches this upcoming November, while everyone is freaking out about that moment in the trailer that came out a few months ago, where we have some wizards apparating inside of Hogwarts grounds, which I really don't think that's what we should be focusing on, considering that I think that's something that Dumbledore puts in place once he becomes headmaster, so we need to relax about that for a minute. My big question is, how does Jacob Kowalski, a no-mage or a muggle in this case, end up back in the fold after he had his memory wiped at the end of the first Fantastic Beasts? And it's finally after several viewings of Fantastic Beasts through its entirety, as well as watching the ending over and over, that I have a couple of ideas as to how they can bring Kowalski back into the fold and have him continue in through the rest of the Fantastic Beasts franchise. And one of those ideas has actually nothing to do with Kowalski himself, but rather his main love interest, Queenie. Now, if you remember, Queenie is the sister of Tina, who lives in the US and part of the MACUSA. She is essentially her sister who can somewhat read minds, or at least feelings of some kind. And she becomes very much infatuated with Kowalski, being a muggle or a no-mage in this case, and being introduced into this magical world, because she's very much fascinated with muggles, kind of in the same vein as Arthur Weasley is in the Harry Potter franchise. Maybe not quite to the same extent, but along the similar lines. Now, at one point in the film, towards the climax and the ending of the movie, Newt and all of the rest of the people, Queenie, Tina, and Kowalski, are standing on a rooftop, Ninja Turtle style, and they see an Obscurus attacking New York. Now, Newt, of course, wanting to assist because he has had past experience with Obscurus and Obscurials, decides to help, so he passes his case on to Tina, who then passes it on to Queenie before they both apparate, and Queenie then wants to pass it on to Kowalski. We then don't see Kowalski until after they've defeated Graves, who ends up being Grindelwald, down in the subways, and they really don't there's a large gap of time where a lot of things can happen. And it's in that gap that I think that this really interesting thing can happen, where Queenie actually decides to take Kowalski and decide to remove his memory, the same way that Dumbledore takes out sort of like those memories, not necessarily removing them, but sort of copying them by tipping the wand to the temple and taking out certain memories so that she can keep them later, because she knows that at some point the MACUSA is going to want to get rid of Kowalski and make sure that he is obliterated and his mind is wiped completely of this magical world. Now, this large gap of time in which we do not see Kowalski at all is Queenie's best opportunity to remove or copy Kowalski's memories of his encounters with all this magical world and be able to store them for later, after the MACUSA has sort of died down a bit and all the troubles died down. She can go return it to him and they can be together. Now, there is another opportunity for Queenie, or even Newt rather, to do the same sort of action, take or copy Kowalski's memory, and then be able to give it back to him at a later point once everything's died down. And that is when the leader, or president, I suppose, of the MACUSA decides that, oh, is that no-mage still around? Make sure you obliterate him. And then we do like this quick cut over to when they're exiting the subway, when it's raining with the Thunderbird potion that's causing all the memory wipes. And I think that is, again, another great opportunity where they could say, hey, listen, we're going to get you back into the fold by doing this particular thing. All we have to do, we're going to wipe your memory for now with this potion thing that affects muggles, and then we're going to come back and we're going to take care of you, give it back, all that good stuff. Two perfect opportunities for this particular event to happen. However, there is another thing that I think could very well be possible. And this theory of mine does seem a little bit far-fetched. However, in a way, it does make some semblance of sense. And that is that Jacob Kowalski very much well could have some sort of connection to the magical world in the past, or like down his family lines, and he actually ends up being a squib. Again, I know this is kind of far-fetched, but after mulling it over and the different options as to how we can bring him back, this one kind of makes sense based on a couple of things that Newt says previously in the movie. Now, if we remember way back when we're sort of trying to capture these Fantastic Beasts, they're in Central Park trying to take down this sort of rhinoceros-looking creature. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but he hands Kowalski a helmet and like a brace sort of thing, because he tells him that physiology of humans, or no-mages and muggles, is actually just slightly different from wizarding kind, witches and wizards.
See, you're a muggle, so our physiologies are subtly different. Put this on.
Why would I have to wear something like this?
Because your skull is susceptible to breakage under immense force.
So there is slight physiological differences that will allow muggles to be different from wizards and have different things impact their bodies, such as in this particular case with the rhinoceros creature, crushing his skull. So that's definitely something we wanted to avoid. So he gave him a helmet because he assumes that he is indeed just a normal no-mage or muggle. However, he could possibly have magical connections and be a squib. Now, if we think about it, we really don't know that much about Kowalski, or at least his background or his family history. We do know that he works at a canning factory, that he wants to open a bakery, and that he at one point went to the war during World War I over to Europe. But that's really all we know. There is one point where he references his mother or grandmother to a picture on the wall that eventually falls, and we find out that Niffler, the little creature that likes to steal coins, jewelry, all that stuff, is actually hiding behind it. Now, this is where it kind of gets interesting, because I think with that picture, we're kind of leading into something and what we can maybe find out. Now, my theory is that he does have connection to the magical world, and that through his family, as it sort of progressed and evolved and through the generations, magic has either been lost or generations of squibs have just developed more regularly and they actually no longer have access to magic, so he's not aware that he has some sort of connection to the magical world. But what makes this so interesting is that at one point, if we go again back towards the end of the movie, when Newt decides to give the venom of one of the other creatures to the Thunderbird to fly up into the sky and release it and come down as rain, that it affects muggles both indoors and outdoors, which is a big plot hole or issue as to how Kowalski keeps his memory for as long as he does. Because if we remember, there are muggles who are being affected by this venom who are in the shower or at the dinner table, who are not outside being touched or any way affected by this rain. So it could either be by humidity, which still would have affected Kowalski because he was also in the subway with the rest of the wizards and being exposed to the air, as well as being exposed to possibly getting rained on. So many other possibilities that he could be affected by this potion or by this venom that allows him to lose his memory before the Makuza president says, hey, is that no-mage around? Make sure you obliterate him. So he actually should have lost his memory ahead of time, unless he did have the physiology, even though he's a squib, to still have the physiology that he wouldn't be affected by the serum, very much like the wizards aren't. Because the wizards are in no way affected by the serum or venom when they're both inside and outside. But all the wizards in the subway are no way affected and lose any sort of memories. There are wizards outside fixing all the buildings, no way affected by this venom, so that they obviously have all the memories. So there's a couple of different possibilities. Number one, Jacob is actually a squib who has enough of difference in physiology from a regular human that he does not know about that allow him to keep his memories and be able to be protected by the magical world and this particular venom that's affecting every single muggle and no-mage in New York City. Another sort of very weak theory that I think kind of can work along the same lines is that because Kowalski was surrounded by a bunch of wizards who were in some way not affected by that serum or that venom, that it kind of created a blanket or an umbrella protecting him also from that serum. That one's a little bit more far-fetched for me. I don't think that one allows for the opportunity to bring him back into the fold later. But I think going back to him being a squib without knowing it, that they could still utilize the moment where Queenie or even Newt actually can take his memories and be able to return it to him. Because if you remember, when Queenie sees Kowalski again at the bakery that he so successfully created with the help of Newt providing the eggshells that are made of silver as collateral to the bank for him to be able to open up his bakery. Once Queenie sees him in the bakery, he sort of touches his neck as if he does have some sort of memory, or maybe it's a muscle memory. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but by Queenie going back into that bakery, again, MACUSA died down. They're not looking for Kowalski anymore. They know Newt got shipped back to Europe, and they're not worried about anything else. That gives Queenie the perfect opportunity to go back into the bakery, give Kowalski his memory back, and be able to allow him to remember all of his events with the magical world, how he got bit on the neck, why he actually likes this girl, which he just sort of sees in a bakery, and it just makes a lot of sense. But I think it's really that squib theory, even with her taking his memory, because everyone believes him to be a nomad, because he's a squib, it just makes so much sense. And I think that's how Kowalski's going to be brought back, and maybe how he's just so accepting of the wizarding world. Maybe he, from some sort of past generation, was told stories of magical things, but because the sort of squib, I don't want to call it a gene, but that sort of has passed along throughout several generations of his family, that he no longer has a connection to the wizarding world, or was never told about the wizarding world. It just makes so much more sense. And I feel like Kowalski just having that connection, but not knowing about it, or not believing it was real, anything like that really opens up a lot of possibilities, and kind of fixes that major plot hole that I think Fantastic Beasts has, in that Kowalski was not affected by the rain, despite him being outside, despite him being a muggle. There's so many things that compound in little Easter eggs and crumbs left throughout the movie that lead me to believe that Kowalski is indeed connected to the magical world, and perhaps a squib, that he can definitely come back, and Queenie has his memory, and she's going to give it to him, and he's back in the fold for the sequel, because Newt likes having him around, and he's a friend.
Oh, well, no matches like you.
No, I'm the only one like me.
And I think that's the best possible way we can bring Kowalski back into the fold for Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. But that's just my theory. I don't know where this came from. I was just watching it the other day, and it just dawned on me, why is Kowalski in the sequel if we kind of got rid of him? But he was a fan favorite, so we got to find a way to loophole it and bring him back into the fold. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that Queenie took his memory? Do you think Newt took his memory? Do you think that he could possibly have a connection to the wizarding world and even be a squib like I think? Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I would love to hear what you guys think, kind of theorize with me. This is just a random idea that I had, and I really wanted to get it out there. Hopefully it's a thing. Maybe it's been on the internet for a while, but it's just hit my brain recently. So make sure you let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. But other than that, that's all I have for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.